Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss The Long Walk, starring Cooper Hoffman, David Johnson, Gary Waring, Toot Niort, forgive me if I said that wrong, Charlie Plummer, Ben Wayne, Jordan Gonzalez, Joshua Odjick, Roman Griffin Davis, Judy Greer, and Mark Hamill, directed by Francis Lawrence. Now, why am I doing The Long Walk? Because it's based on a Stephen King novel that I think he wrote the material for. But if I were to do a Francis Lawrence retrospective, the only thing I will never review in my time is I Am Legend. I hate that movie because of how much they killed the dog. It makes me cry like a little girl. Well, not like a little girl, but like a little wussy, more or less, because that movie is just too depressing for me. And if there was a sequel, I refuse to do that piece of crap. Okay, I'm just gonna say it now. There's a reason I don't want to want. There's some movies out there I don't wish to watch ever again, and that's one of them. So let's just get straight into this movie. Now, we open with a letter for Raymond Garrity, played or Ray for short, played by Philip Seymour Hoffman's son Cooper Hoffman from Licorice Pizza, saying the government accepts his participation in intending the Long Walk that has been around since the 1970s, as we're in a dystopian America by, let me see if I'm saying this word right, totalitarian regime during that time, as he gets a ride to the Long Walk by his mother Ginny, played by Judy Greer. And after being in another Stephen King film in the remake of Carrie from 2013, I'm thinking why is she here is beyond me, as they keep casting her in movies after 13 going on 30, as she and Ray say their goodbyes, and Ray goes with some other guys like Peter McViers, as I'm going to call Peter for the rest of the movie, played by David Johnson, whom I reviewed in Alien Romulus, where he was the robot in that movie, or I forget what the frickin' hell that's called. Stebbins, played by Garrett Waring, whom I've also reviewed before in Independence Day Resurgence. Arthur Baker, played by Toot Niot, whom I don't know as an actor. Asshole Gary Barkovich, forgive me if I said that wrong, played by Christopher Plummer's grandson Charlie Plummer, whom I have not reviewed, but I have unfortunately seen the Roland Emmerich's Moonfall, which terrible film. Hank Olson, played by Ben Wing from Karate Kid Legends, which I reviewed earlier this year. Richard Harkness, played by Jordan Gonzalez, whom I also don't know as an actor. Collie Parker, played by Joshua Odjick, whom I also don't know as an actor. And Curly, played by Roman Griffin Davis, whom from his well-known role in Jojo Rabbit, as he was the main kid in that film. And we get introduced to the Major, played by Luke Skywalker from Star Wars / Joker from Batman the Animated Series himself, Mark Hamill. And I really like how we know the victims before we meet the Major, as we know the Major from something he did to Ray that'll be explained later in the movie. And I like these characters, except for Gary, as he comes off like an asshole since we first met him, and they start walking at the pace of at least 3 miles per hour or 5 kilometers per mile in the middle of the road. And I like how the cinematography was shot, and director Francis Lawrence made this an intense movie. And I reviewed most of his filmography, but the one I'll never review, nor will I ever watch, fucking I Am Legend again, as I hate that movie with a passion because they killed the poor doggy off. May that doggy rest in peace. By mile 3, Hank points out how the world is watching, and Ray finds it creepy, in which it is a worldwide television show, as it looks like it. And we move on to mile 5, where Hank puts gum in his pocket, and Gary stops to tie his shoe and gives an attitude about it. And here's a tip: if they get up to a maximum of 3 warnings in that particular second, that person will be shot dead by the Major's military men, and everybody else calls him a dumbass, and I'm talking about Gary, because he is a dumbass for it. And he is this whole movie while they continuously walk. Ray says he doesn't need the money, and he'll explain why later in the movie, and he'll talk shit about the Long Walk and have a cigarette until a writer comes up to them as he tells them he's writing a book about these term of events. And this is a pretty likable Stephen King-based movie. Curly starts to get in pain while walking the Long Walk, and he stops to the ground while Ray tells Curly to keep walking, but he gets 3 warnings until he gets his head blown up. And this is when the title of the movie on the screen shows up, as we move on to Ray getting a cantina, while Peter takes a leak while walking, which did feel a little weird. While afterhand, Ray explains he joined for the reason of his father, as it will take him to a while to explain why, as we see Ray getting a fan of as people pointed out to him, as Hank gets his leg feeling funny, which while one of the guys has a stroke, and Gary laughs at him for it and tells him they should stop smiling. They should be smiling as his stakes are higher for them. And by mile 25, the audience sees a cat and a couple of kids watching the guys walking the long walk. And the acting on this is surprisingly well done for a Stephen King material based on his imagination. Hank drops a piece of gum and brings up his allergies while Gary makes fun of a man named Rink and gives him shit about his family and says his mother has coupons for blowjobs. And Gary gets him killed, and people blame Gary for taunting him and getting him killed. And this motherfucker is a giant piece of shit, as well as a pain in the ass, as Charlie Plummer does a good job at being a pain in the ass, as another guy named Ronald takes a dump while on the long walk and gets killed over it, as we move on to mile 35 as nighttime comes. And Ray tells Peter he'll tell him in the morning, as Ray dreams of his mother singing a lullaby as he was asleep while walking on the long walk. And he wakes up, thanks to Peter, and he brings up his mother until a hill approaches, and Gary taunts him as he does the military. And this movie is very intense, as this is the most intense edge-of-your-seat thriller I've seen in a while. Maybe since the first A Quiet Place film, in my opinion. With sound, which is a difference. Ray gets a cantina to wake his own ass up and apologizes to Peter for the outburst he made a few minutes ago. And next day, as well as mile 59 comes, and Ray explains how he has a very different reason to go on this long walk, but he doesn't explain it quite yet, as there's 18 people left in the long walk. And we start on 50 workers as we move on to Collie, talking with Ray about and Peter, as Peter torments Hank, and the writer Richard is hurt and killed, with a couple of kids watching the military killing Richard. And Gary tells Ray to write him a letter and threatens Peter of how he's got plans for him. And while they get to 100 miles, while Stebbins gets getting sick, and one of the guys running out of for food and gets killed. And this was intense for damn sure, while the premise is pretty good, as it was well executed from start to finish. We get to mile 103, and Hank feels somewhat better, and they talk while Ray says he wishes to end up the long walk as the chant "fuck the long walk and fuck the major" as this at the same motherfucking time, while Stebbins listens to them hack about how long the long walk is bullshit, and to begin with, and they get rained on while Ray sleeps during the long walk once again, and Arthur takes a dump and almost dies from it, and Peter tells him he smells like shit and to run 2 miles away from them, as Ray confesses his father was his hero, as he explains the Major killed him years ago. And that was a twist I didn't see coming, as he wants vengeance against the Major. And we see it in a flashback, and explains a lot why Ray wants to do the long walk in the first place, which makes perfect sense. While it was a tragic moment of the film, and it pulls out tragedy tremendously. Ray explains if he wins, he will grab the gun from one of the military men to execute the Major for what he did to him by killing his father, as Peter tells him it all matters, and the dialogue written is well done, and Peter cheers him up. And we move on to mile 170, and one man gets his legs crushed by a tank, and the military telling him to keep walking, but he can't, so they shoot him dead, which to me isn't the best excuse for the military to kill someone. While mile 203 comes, and it's nighttime, and Stebbins talks to Ray and Peter, and tells them what to see when Hank is getting to go down, which is very soon. And Hank gets himself down, and Arthur wants to help Hank, and as does Ray, but unfortunately it's too late for Hank. As Ray gets Arthur out of there while Hank is suffocating, and I'm thinking, oh, for fuck's sakes, just finish him off until we move on to the next scene. And I felt bad for the Karate Kid as well as the other characters. Mile 209 as the audience. We move on to Mile 209 as the audience learns Hank was married to a woman named Clementine. And when whoever wins gives her some of the winnings and their gratitude towards Hank, and Gary wants to join along for Hank. As he confesses, he got off on the wrong foot with each character when I'm saying that's bullshit. Until he does something incredibly stupid and gets himself killed with a motherfucking knife. And as I thought this time, this he was going to kill Ray after the threat he made to Peter earlier in the film. And we move on to Mile 260, and the guy's singing, "Oh my darling, oh my darling, oh my darling Clementine," which was honorable while the next day comes, and Collie chats with Ray about how homesick he is, as Ray explains they're all homesick. And I never felt the minutes of this movie, as it's completely tightly edited from start to finish. Ray's shoes break off, and he has no choice but to get rid of them. And they see Ginny, while Ray slows down and says how sorry he is to his mother, while Ginny tells him to keep walking as she's worried about him. And Peter tells him to keep fucking going, as he almost got killed. He was almost killed, and Peter calms down Ray and tells him to focus while Collie gets killed by Mile 306, and there's 5 of them left, like Ray, Peter, Arthur, Stebbins, and Collie, until Collie acts out and gets shot dead, and he finishes himself. So it's down to 4 of them left, and Mile 324 comes, and Arthur is bleeding from the nose as Ray and Peter force him to keep walking, as he gives up and gets himself killed. And this whole movie is dramatic in a very good way, as this is so far a very good movie. Mile 326 comes, and the Major talks while Ray insults him, while Stebbins explains how he knows about the long walk and the Major is his father. And again, a twist I didn't see coming, and he describes himself as a rabbit. And Stebbins stops walking and gets himself killed, which is fucked up, as the Major got his own fucking son killed. As we move on to a town where it rains, and Ray explains things at happening points to spend his last moment when he was a kid, and a crowd full of people cheer them until Peter wants to stop for Ray and his mother, while Ray wants to keep walking and talks him into it, and Ray stops himself and gets himself killed by the Major, as Peter is the winner. And after Peter being congratulated by the Major for being the winner, Peter asks for a military man's gun because of a wish that he can get granted that was brought up earlier in the film, in order to kill the Major, and he does, and doesn't accept the prize money for Ray, as he wanted Ray to be with his mother. And the climax pays off the story at the end of the day. But it was a good movie. But how much of a good movie was it? Let's talk about it in a rating. I'll give this movie a 8.3 out of 10. This is a pretty decent movie for a Stephen King movie, as he thought the material not based on the book itself, but not on the book itself, excuse me, as I really like the characters, except for Gary, as he comes off like an asshole, as Mark Hamill can pull off evil very well, in not just animated form, but in real form. And I liked how the reveal of how he was the reason Ray wants to join the Long Walk in the first place, because of his father's death, which is something I didn't see coming. And I also like Stebbins turns out to be the Major's son, which is another thing I didn't expect. And I like how director Francis Lawrence made this into an intense movie. And I like the cinematography how the cinematography was shot in this whole movie. The acting this was surprisingly well done for a movie based on the material Stephen King made up in his imagination, as Charlie Plummer does a good job of being a pain in the ass, since this movie is the most intense edge of your seat I've seen since, I think, the first Quiet Place film. But this one being louder, and the difference for damn sure, as the premise was actually pretty good, as it's well executed. It's a well executed premise from start to finish, and it makes perfect sense. And this pulls off tragedy quite tremendously. The dialogue written for the movie is well written, and there were times I felt very bad for the characters, as this is a solid recommendation for the movie. And I never felt the minutes of this hour and 48-minute movie, as it was completely tightly edited from start to finish. And this whole movie is dramatic in a very good way, as this is a very good movie in my opinion. I don't know what else to say with the climax that pays off at the end of the day. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me for this review. And until then, I think I'm going to go for a walk.